All right, folks, welcome back. So excited to get going with the reveal of the first ever First Gin and Juice Catalyst Awards. So grateful for the judges. Five of the 25 judges that we had participate in this pilot event. And I just want to say a few words about First Gin and Juice, how it got started and how we landed on the Catalyst Award. So First Gin and Juice as a concept was actually started back when I was working at Loyola Marymount University, and we were planning First Generation Awareness Week, and my students wanted to identify celebrities who were first gen. And so that would have been, I don't know, 2014 or something like that. And you couldn't just Google, and actually you can barely do this now, but you couldn't just Google and come up with a list of people. And it was sort of the same names over and over: Sonia Sotomayor, Denzel Washington, Oprah. Like, it was just the same three people over and over again. And I said, wow, wouldn't it be great if there was one place we could go to and like have a list? And so I kept that in the back of my mind. Fast forward to a t-shirt business that my son launched. I'm representing today actually for First Gin and Juice, the brand, the t-shirt brand. And he was selling t-shirts, the old school black on black ones. And of course, so my daughter says, well, you can't sell anything without an Instagram account. I was like, oh, okay, Zoe. So, so we created an Instagram account to support the business. And then when my son stopped selling the shirts, I didn't want to let go of the Instagram account. And so that evolved from promoting the t-shirts to promoting first gen celebrities or first gens in popular culture and media. So, it's become an archive. Like people, Dr. Josie Alquist has said, you're curating. So I embrace that. And it's just been a labor of love for sure. So recently, and I give some credit to Renee Stovall, who couldn't join us today. She's one of the admin for the Empowering First Generation College Students Facebook group. And, we were just bouncing around some ideas, and I was thinking, why don't we do an awards, some recognition? I'm a firm believer in like the power of positive affirmation. And so I talk a lot of smack about what I don't see, but I thought, why don't we celebrate what is out there, right? And I think we can agree, and we're going to talk about them. There were some really compelling first gen stories out there. They may not necessarily say first gen, but clearly the narratives are about that. So that was really the impetus behind this awards, to take a look at the landscape and celebrate what's actually out there, and actually let those storytellers know we see them and we appreciate the work that they're doing. So again, I thank you. There are only 6 categories, and I didn't vote. So you all had a really tough job. I don't envy you at all. But before we get into the winners, I do want to just ask your overall impressions of all of the nominees and the categories. Just, I know some of you submitted feedback about the diversity and then also levels of access, but anyone want to sort of jump in with just overall impressions?
Well, I think that that for me there was definitely some titles that I was familiar with and I have seen, but a few others that I had not even heard of, and it just reminded me of as we are seeing this emerging field of art, of movies, of books that are focused on the first-hand experience, or at least showcase it. There's still a lot of work to do in terms of making it well known, the marketing, making it part of that mainstream dialogue that we have. So I'm really glad that you're doing this, because I do believe this will help in bringing those stories a little bit more to the center of our nationwide dialogue, and expose people to stories that they may not have heard of, whether it's on TV or a book, or in the theaters, or live stream, or wherever it is that they might enjoy this medium. So yeah, that was general impression, but thanks.
Mhm. I agree. I think that overall we know that these stories exist, but how to organize them and how to make them part of places and spaces. I mean, imagine if you went to the UCLA bookstore and there was, a first gen section, right? And like that, someone would look back and be like, no, that's not real. And then go through these books, and it's not one story, right? It's so like, because it's complex. And I think that's what's, and I honestly don't see a story, and I'm not going to write a book to my knowledge, but like I've never read a book, and I still haven't read a book with like my experience, to be honest. But to know that like there's so many different kinds of experiences that are like the first gen experience, I think is important. So to have a section in places and spaces again, I think that is important,
I got chills when you said that, Jessica. Wouldn't it be great?
But just to piggyback on that, I thought that too, the range of stories, everything from rural first gen to single parents to, I mean, there was just such a range of it. But yet, even though there were, as first gen, we identified with something in every single one of them. And just to know that's the strength of being first gen in this community, I think, is because we're not alone. And even though I may not know what it feels like to be from East LA, I do, there's something that connects us and bonds us. And it's that unity that makes us so strong. So I think that this really showcased all of that and brought it together. And the themes were perfect in my mind. I thought the categories were great because they really did classify them in groupings.
I do want to bring up something that, Jessica, I believe it was your comment about, I think the tradition, if there's a narrative thread, right? If we're like now creating a theory of first gen narratives, I do think most of them have like the happy ending. You see a lot of characters with the support of the family. And Jessica, I always appreciate you bringing up the complexities and nuances, and everyone doesn't have that experience, right? I don't know if you want to just talk a little bit more about that, but I thought that was such a valid perspective as well.
I think, well, for lots of reasons, I haven't written a book, but the idea to even get a PhD was honestly, and it was something I was told, never tell your PhD advisor, because my PhD advisor was like old school Harvard, old school Princeton, like went to prep school. And so I was told, don't tell him you want to teach at the community college with your PhD. And I knew like I can't get tenure track, but like, I guess my background was, I'm Native American also, right? So my experience is different. But I think from Los Angeles, like my family's been in LA for like over 5 generations, but because of access, because natives not going to being allowed to go to school, or because of segregation, or because we weren't allowed to go to college. And I'm also, my parents had me later in life. So, my dad's over 75. And so that was before Brown versus education, I mean, so the thing is, like, he's just like, why would you go to college? You just get married. Or like, he was like, that's a stupid idea. He's like, I saw people go to college, and like his best friend, Jesse, who I'm named after, he went to USC and got his PhD in psychology, and he didn't do well in his career. He died poor, and he didn't have someone to help him navigate, and they grew up in the same neighborhood. And so he was just like, why would you, he goes, he was in so much debt for getting his PhD in psychology, and it didn't even work out for him. I bought a house with my blue collar career, and he couldn't even do that. So why would you do that? That's a dumb idea. So not having that support system from my parents, and not even like the possibility, and I'm an only child, and my cousins are in their 70s. So like my uncles were in World War II. So college was also not something on their radar. And so from my perspective, or their perspective, they're like, wow, Jessica's the only person to have gone to college, and she went to grad school, and she doesn't own a house. What a failure. Why would we want our kids to go to college? Like, why would we want to, like, see, this is why we told her not to go. And I think, like, for me, that's why I wanted to teach the community college level, because my parents were not on board. So I used to go to community college at night when I was in high school. And I used to tell my parents I was at cheerleading practice, and the cheerleaders were like, "That's so stupid. You want to go to college?" And so I go to PCC, and I took classes, and I think because I'm mixed racially, I didn't grow up with a certain language. I grew up in an Asian neighborhood.
Jessica, I'm going to bring you back to the to the narrative.
But that's why I like all of those things. Like, they're not cookie cutter experiences,
right.
And so I wanted to teach at the community college level, because when I was there, I didn't see people who looked like me, right? And then when I asked them how they got there, they said that it was because their husbands paid for it, their parents paid for it, and so then I'm always asking questions about how to navigate these systems. And I think, I'm still trying to figure out the pipeline to homeownership, to be honest.
Right. I'm going to have to cut you off, because I appreciate the story, but I think you were getting at like the like you were saying, like the absence of certain narratives, and how you haven't seen that particular story. That's not, a happy sort of like, oh, Disney ending, right? It's like this is how I've been marginalized from my family. And we didn't see a lot of those in the nominations, right? So I don't know. I really do think you should I really think you should commit it to like print or something, right?
Well, but I wanted to do that with students one-on-one, rather than like write a book about it. Like, and I think that's another thing. Like, these stories are really brave to share and to put pen to paper or digitally. But the thing is, I don't have a community of my own. So if you have a community of your own, it's a little easier to put pen to paper. But when you don't have that, it's harder, you know?
That's an excellent point. Well, and Mike, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add. We were just overall impressions, but happy to get into the first category.
Just I really quickly to add, I think it only showed a lot of the different areas that can be covered by our stories as a first generation. So that was really great to see. And I mean, I think the one area where I am biased is with Last Chance U. I know we'll talk about that later on today in the call, but just want to throw that out there that I got to show a little bias toward that, because that was definitely my favorite series, for a while now.
All right, friends. Well, let's kick it off with, there we go. Why is it not pulling up? It's Best Fiction, which for some reason is acting weird. Okay, here are the nominees. They are, why can't I read this right now? Oh my gosh, I'm struggling. Saltwater by Jessica Andrews. The Daughters of, here we go, of Erie Town. Real Life by, why can't I read? Real Life, I can't read the author's name right now.
Brandon Taylor.
By Brandon Taylor, thank you. The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. And then Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed. And before I announce the winner, I'll just say, this goes back to your point, Cynthia, that like 2 of those books were really popular in 2020. Just as a whole, like in like on bestsellers list. And then a lot of them were, the other 3, I think, were pretty less known, but you all voted, and the winner is The Vanishing Half. So I don't know if that was a surprise to any of you. I have not read that one yet. It is the story of twins, I believe, who are raised differently and have a first-gen background. Eve, you may have told me about this one. I can't remember, but it's certainly not marked. I don't think it says first gen in it, but definitely a first gen story. Any reactions to this? Anyone super excited that this one won, or was interested in another book?
I think Cynthia gets dibs on this one because she's a twin.
Well, like I said, I'm a twin myself, right? And I obviously my brother is also, you know, first gen. He was able to go to college. We both were, but we just had such a very different trajectory in our lives. That was really marked, I believe, from our experience in the K through 12 system. And then it just became even more so apparent once we came into higher ed. You know, my story was heading from, you know, UCLA undergrad, PhD program, and then just kind of progressing in that way. And unfortunately, my twin brother didn't make it past the first year of undergrad and had to leave the university. And, you know, it was a very interesting back and forth with higher ed for him that at this moment has not resulted in a degree yet, right? And so I think, you know, for me, it's really important to show how different the experiences can be from people who, or two individuals who come from the same family and yet can have such different outcomes, right? And for me, you know, it's the structural impact of it all that really makes a difference. So yeah, I'm glad this book won.
I haven't read it, but it's on everybody's book lists that I see on Goodreads. Like people that I don't think that they are particularly interested in the first gen experience, it's on their book list. So I think that says a lot. And it wasn't a tiebreaker or anything, but I think, you know, I didn't have a chance to read Such a Fun Age until more recently. Like I finished it a couple days ago because it was available to the library. And I honestly would have voted for that instead of what I voted for, but it doesn't matter because it wasn't, you know, close.
Yeah, and I was actually surprised. Earlier in the year, Such a Fun Age had gotten a lot of press and a lot of publicity. And so I read it and was shocked that there are at least two, for the main women in the stories are both first gen. And it's not really talked about in the reviews of it. And so, and maybe there's an opportunity for, since, for example, since what's the one that since The Vanishing Half is so popular, for us to, like, for those who are invested in first gen stories to point out, like, hey, this is what we're talking about here. So, okay, next up is best memoir. And honestly, y'all, I thought this was really, I mean, I think these just get tougher, to be honest. So the nominees are This Is What America Looks Like, by Ilhan Omar. Oh gosh. And Fairest by Meredith Toulousan. In the Shadow of the Valley by Bobby Kahn, and Spirit Run by Noe Alvarez. So I am interested in each of these, and I don't know that I could have picked just one. However, you all voted, and the winner is, I am really struggling with my phone right here. Hang on one second. Darn it. Okay, hold on. Hold on, drum roll, drum roll. I'm gonna have to go to my computer. Okay, all right, for best memoir, oh, it's a tie. No wonder I couldn't see it. This Is What America Looks Like and Spirit Run are the winners for that one. So makes sense. I thought it was really tough. Reaction. Mike is clapping. Mike, which one were you pulling for? And that became a tie at the end, by the way. It wasn't a tie until the last judge voted.
Oh, until the very last vote. Yeah, no, I don't. I was just clapping that it you know, we got a tie. It just seems that, you know, they're both so good that we have to get that tie there.
Other reactions.
I think it's great that This Is What America Looks Like was included, because I think that is someone who can sort of give more exposure to that first gen experience in a really public way,
Mhm.
right? And especially right now, I feel like the last 4 years, her story has really been highlighted for different reasons. So I think wanting to learn more about her was interesting to me, and I'm glad that it was available. And you know, the complexity of her story is interesting too. And I mean, a lot of the things I'm like, I can't imagine, you know.
Other
think
reactions? Yeah.
with the spirit one is to just think about how we're all on a quest for meaning. And I'm a person who's deeply spiritual myself. So to see it from a first gen perspective and to know like I'm not by myself in this, that while we're still trying to find success and to find our path, what does that look like? What does this all mean? Thinking about, you know, our race and our background, our culture, our upbringings, and to just make sense of it as we are all navigating and to know that there's like a higher purpose. So like a lot of what I felt connected to was being able to see my own story. And then again, like I was saying, you know, about something else the time before, here was somebody who didn't look like me or come from where I came from, but yet this first gen experience and this quest for meaning and to do something greater was so mutual and like, that's it.
This particular narrative was brought to my attention from Gina Liberati, who is a guidance counselor at an all-boys school. And I believe they are using that text I don't know if it's a common read, but they're definitely, the student body there is using it. So some of these I think really should be used, like trio programs and summer bridge programs and things like that. Okay, it's about to get tougher because now we have, Mike, are you ready? Best unscripted television show. Man, this was tough right until the end, let me tell you. Okay, so we have Last Chance U, Cheer, and Deaf U. And interesting thing of note, Cheer and Last Chance U are from the same creator. And so he's just got his handle on these sort of first gen experiences. So, all right, so drum roll. It was close, but there is a winner in this one. Drum roll. The winner for best unscripted television show is Last Chance U. All right, Mike, go ahead. You want to speak?
Oh,
He
you
can't
used the camera for that.
Sorry, I'm on my phone, so I was like, I couldn't put my camera on at first, but really excited that it won. Like I said a little earlier, you know, a little biased for it, but I think when it came out, I remember texting LT about it, and obviously with 2020, it's been a year where we can watch things a little bit more, and I remember LT and I would talk about the different stories from the different players in the show, like, hey, this student is first gen and this is what they're going through, or, you know, previous seasons, these were some of the favorite players. But I told her from the very beginning of this season, it felt very different. I mean, one, because they're in California, it's a different college, but these students were different from the athletes in the other colleges because they had to provide their own housing, or, you know, some of them were working. Like our favorite player, he was working at Wingstop, and they show him living out of his car at one point too. So
I literally cried.
yeah, and it was really it tugged at your heartstrings every single episode. There's another player that, you know, not to give any spoilers, but like for his family history, like the things that happened in his family, and they talk about it. You know, it just shows you how all of the different stories that can go into being a first-gen college student, and especially at Laney College, which, I mean, to be honest, I had never heard of before Last Chance U, but I think that they got a lot of exposure from it. And the coach just seemed like he really understood these players, and he really had their backs. Oh, and also the last thing I'll say about it is that he was married to a therapist or psychologist or counselor in the field in that area. And he would actually use some of the techniques that she would tell him about with his players, or like he would have his players talk to his wife or get referred to counselors. So I thought that the piece of like mental health and how important mental health is, that was really cool to see with a college coach.
Great, thank you. Of course, we got to talk about Cheer as well. Cheer was I can't believe that was all this one year. But both of these storylines are about first gen students at community college. You know how I feel about like all this focus on the Ivy League and private schools and highly selective schools, but really showing like all the sort of external barriers that students often face.
Yeah, yeah. And if I may add,
Oh, of course.
I voted for Cheer. I really wanted that one to win, but I love that both of these shows really showcased higher education, the institution, as a place where students can find a community or a sense of belonging in a way that supports their own dreams, whether that's to continue on an athletic path or a more educational path. So I a firm believer of higher education. For me, I'm just like, yes, like go community college. Is like it's great. It's great to see that that environment and that safe haven for those who do find it be so shown in such a national national mainstream way.
Did anyone happen to vote for Deaf U or want to talk? Oh, okay. Can you say something about it?
Competition. So
It was hard.
because of the layer of not only in my first gen, and I went to look it up, Daquan, that was the character who I was so focused on.
I know.
Came from nothing. His mom passed away. His sister raised him. He was so determined to make it for his family, to make it, and to do something and do all these things. And then he still had this hearing, impairment that is another challenge. So just when he's already challenged, being Black, being a Black man coming from the hood, then you have this hearing challenge, and then you go to college, and then the petty and messiness with getting the girl pregnant because he wants the family, right? So all these things that he wants to become and do, and yet still the world is a challenge for him in navigating physically. Something that, people who have different challenges, you don't always think about that being a first gen thing, because it's going to school, it's, being able to afford school, but then I want to be social and I have a hearing challenge. And so what does that mean for jobs? Like I'm already don't know how to navigate professionally. Then I have to navigate professionally when I'm done with school. And then I have this other challenge. So that was like, oh my gosh, I was so blown by that. But that was definitely a favorite. And then Rodney, his parents being two Black people.
Educated.
Harvard. Y'all went to Harvard, but then here you guys have made it out the hood, right? You're doing well for yourselves. And then you have a child who now has a challenge and you've got to help him navigate college, but in a much different way.
Yeah.
And so it was just so fascinating, but I fell in love with that, because then couldn't believe the level of petty at this institution either. Because I was like, this is kind of, it's just interesting.
It's just privilege.
Yeah, but it also goes to show that, it doesn't matter. People are people across spectrums. It's just a matter of how we're able to navigate and how we find our path. So, but I love that show. So that was definitely mine.
Yeah, I voted for it too, because I thought that added layer is something I don't see representation in a lot, and I think it's really rare that, I see that level of representation, period, but then also as the first gen experience, but then also on TV.
Right. It was so many things.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. And I'm curious, what did Rodney's, I know they went to Harvard, but what did they do for a living?
I forgot what they did.
Exactly. The dad is an artist, and I forgot what the mom does.
I don't know if government or not. I'll have to look into it, but they were doing well. They were literally doing well. Like, I was like, but Harvard though? Like, y'all went to Harvard?
But I think that's interesting, because I've had a conversation with my mom's former boss, and she went to law school. She's first gen. She went to Berkeley, and she's a lot older, right? So she's at a level of success where she lives in Palos Verdes. She sent her kids both to Harvard and Notre Dame. And she's like, I have so much more in common with my kids than I actually do my parents. And she had shared with me that she's like, I think you haven't had that yet. you don't know what that's like. She's like, I have that with my kids because we have that in common. But what would it be if, like, you know, this person who's a Berkeley grad who works at Deloitte, you know, and made partner and all of that, if she had kids who she thought, okay, great, I'm going to share this, and then they have something that she doesn't understand as an added layer, where with her actual kids, she's like, okay, I know what these challenges are and I'm going to help you navigate them. But I can't imagine what it would be like for a parent to try to help. You're like, okay, you're not first gen, so here we go. But then there's this something that they don't have experience in. But the fact that they're just so nurturing and supportive, that was just really heartwarming to see. And then seeing that other, you know, kid who didn't have that support, like that, I could relate to. The family stuff I could sort of relate to. But yeah, I thought that was an interesting perspective, and I hope we see more of that in other abilities as well.
Totally. Yeah. Okay. Moving on to Best Television Show Scripted. The nominees are Hentified, Kim's Convenience, Normal People, Grownish, and Transplant. And this one was really, really close. There was a tie, and I think until like the last few votes there. But I can't wait to get your reactions to Grownish being the winner. Why are you clapping, Eve? Go ahead and speak on it.
Because I remember the first time I got caught into this first gen stuff was that, and I texted you immediately.
Yes, you did.
But it's this idea that when he was talking to the dean about, you know, being able to pay back loans and going to
Aaron,
exactly. I was just like, oh my goodness, this is first gen. But I resonated with that. Just trying to figure it out, this whole college thing. And you've got this group of friends who come from such a diverse background. Some have money, some don't, but you're all kind of in the same boat. And whereas for some of your friends, it seems so easy. But then for me, I've got this, you know, these mounds of debt. What am I going to do with this? And what does me having a job look like? Because I can't have a parent just make a phone call and, you know, get me in, or I can't just go home and it's going to be all right. But that one really, that set me off into this whole caught up in the first gen and pop culture thing. So that's why.
That was your turning point. You know, someone said they didn't think that the themes in Grownish were like strong enough. Like it was just implied. The first gen is implied, when in fact there are multiple characters, not just Aaron, who are first gen. And when you look at the list, I don't think any of them are, except for maybe Normal People. The other ones are also more implied too, right? Not like in your face, like Last Chance U or Cheer. I thought Hentified was going to win at one point. It was really, really popular. It's a popular show. But does anyone want to comment more either on Grownish or another show that you were pulling for?
Hentified is from the community that my family's from, you know, so I think, but I couldn't relate to it because, you know, they had family support and they had community, you know, in ways.
But beyond that though, because we're not going to connect with, like, our personal biographies aren't going to connect to everything.
But I think that's what made me upset, because for me, like, my family is mixed, so I wasn't raised with a Native background or like a Latinx background or culture or language or all these things. So for me, the region is super important. I could, you know, and I think for me, they all pulled together to overcome the obstacle. And I think that's what was the challenging part of seeing that from my actual community, because in my family, the region is like LA, that side of LA is more important than actually my ethnic makeup. And so
oh no, I was here. Dina, I know, wanted to jump in as well.
I just want to say I was pulling for Grownish too.
Oh.
First of all, I love Blackish, but but I think for me, Grownish it showed the parents kind of being involved and trying to be part of, even though they didn't understand. And I know that conversations I've had with my mom, she said, it hurts my feelings when you say that, you're first gen and, you don't have understanding. And I'm like, but she does it. She's kind of relating the understanding to love and support, which they had supported me completely, but the knowledge base wasn't there. And I think that for me, that's what Grownish really showed, was that the parents and the family were being supportive in the best way that they could. And we know that they love them because we've kind of seen them over the seasons and things like that. But, for her to be, all of it together, it was just the family dynamic is what I liked.
Yeah. And I especially like moments where we can see different types of capital showcased, right? The social capital, the familial capital, and how you can use them to your advantage or maybe used against you, right? To form some sort of disadvantage. I think that's really unique. And one of the wonderful things about being first gen, right? That it's such it's an identity that is so often intersectional with other gender, race, other factors, other identities that will definitely impact your own experience through the process. Eve, I saw you.
I want to add, and you just pointed out, I think the biggest turning point is when Zoe didn't talk to her dad about Aaron's interview, and he was so dependent on her to be able to get that interview, to get that job, to change his future. And for her, because she's got her whole world going on, no big deal, it wasn't a priority. And for him, this was his life. Really feel that. How often is that our case as first gens across the board, where that one friend, that one interview, that one opportunity changes things for us? And so she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. But he's like, this is my life and you've got it easy. And I don't even have a clue. And I think that's the part that really hits across the spectrum for us as first gens.
Yeah, and that's why I voted for it, because I was like, she doesn't get it. This is huge, but then it also happened so quickly that he did get, and I was like, well, that's good. I'm happy for him, but it's not real.
So do you think that the show needs to be more explicit about the first genness, or you all as a feel like it's kind of in the sweet spot right now with the themes?
I think it's always good to talk about that and give exposure, because when you see shows talk about substance abuse or something, they explicitly say it, right? Like it's not just implied, because then it can go over someone's head. And I think that's the idea, right? Like if you explicitly say these things and have these markers and have the language to talk about them, then it's normalized.
Jessica, you're giving me like great ideas for when I reach out to the show to let them know that they've won, to like encourage them to keep going and to be more explicit with it. Because they do have, the writer's room does have their own Twitter account. So I'll see what I can do. Okay, down to the last two. So best documentary. So a lot of interesting points will come out of this particular category, but Boy State, which was really popular once upon a time. 30 for 30 about Michael Vick, John Lewis, Good Trouble, and Becoming, about Michelle Obama. And one of the interesting things about these particular ones is a question about access. Like, what if you don't have Apple TV or you didn't get the ESPN Plus, right, to watch these things? Anyway, the winner, and I think this is, the winner by a majority is Becoming by Michelle, about Michelle Obama. You all are nodding, like, was that no surprise there? Okay, why that one? And was there, the second place one is John Lewis's documentary, but reactions, Michelle Obama.
I voted for John Lewis because John Lewis, and I don't know, I think I feel like he's my dad's generation, and I think I kind of like, I'm so grateful for like the work that he's done. And when you look at, I didn't watch this, but I know his life, and just knowing like what he accomplished. I watched an episode of like Roots, and it was like and it showed his family tree, and like, so I know his first gen experience because of that show from PBS. And I was just so inspired. And honestly, sometimes when things get hard, I'm like, John Lewis, okay, like, you know, that I'm not on a like that bridge, like, no, I I think it's just incredible.
I'm gonna come back to him, but anyone want to speak up on behalf of Becoming, the documentary?
Can we? I mean, I don't feel like, I don't know if I feel worthy to speak on it.
I don't think it's as, it's not super on your, beating you over head about being first gen though.
No, it's not. But it was Michelle Obama. I mean,
she got the sympathetic vote.
When I first got the ballot, I was like, oh, I already know. I already know. But I think that, I mean, what I loved about it was seeing her connection and her connection to especially young girls, and how she just is just so giving and of positivity and encouragement, and so empowering to everybody. Even she doesn't even have to meet anybody. I mean, she's just, her existence exudes empowerment in my mind. I just adore her so much.
Any other thoughts? Okay, Michelle Obama. So that's why I won. I do want to say something about John Lewis and why I think it's important for us to continue to centralize his first gen identity, because a lot of people are now using that phrase good trouble when they talk about him. But what I've said to people is like, why that matters when you're first gen. And I know I may even cry, but and I know I'm gonna speak to some of you. For many of us, when our parents send us off to school, there's so much coming with us, right? Their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations. And for many of us, they don't want us to disturb that. And so John Lewis, for him to like be out and protesting and whatnot, his parents were genuinely scared for him, not just as a Black man. Yes, people pick up on that narrative. He was the first person in his family to go to college. And a lot of times the message is you go, you put your head down, you get good grades, you shut up, right? And so for him to say, there's time to get into good trouble is such a moment of like rebellion that some of us have to go through with our parents. Be like, actually, I'm going to move forward, mom and dad, So I don't think that really is talked about enough. Like it's don't be flippant about him making, not you all, but for people just like, oh yeah, good trouble. Like that is such a powerful thing to do, and to say back to your parents when they don't get it, right? So
and I think that message is huge. But in John Lewis's experience, I don't know, in watching that like PBS documentary, it talked about how his great grandparents actually could vote because like they were really proactive about it. And so he was like, oh, I come from that, And so the thing is, like, he also knew like it was a legacy in a different way. Maybe it wasn't legacy in college access, but it was a legacy of like, I do need to vote. And that was like something that drove his career. But I think that's also really important because he knew like that his ancestors created trouble to vote and then it was taken away, right? But I think that's huge just to know like we did that, and for him specifically. So I think that may have motivated him to like be rebellious in other ways. But I hear what you're saying about, not being able to rebel because you want to be this example.
Yeah. Well, and I just bring it up because he, like the context for good trouble came out of his conversation with his parents, and it's been picked up and applied in other parts of his life. But it was, I've read his work where he said, I've told my parents, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my gosh, that's such a brave thing to do, right? So
yeah, especially when you feel like you have the weight of your family, you're like carrying the torch. I always imagine it's like, the Olympic torch or the Olympic thing is going to be lit, and everybody's like passing the torch. Like
Yeah.
when I think about family and what it means to be first gen in relation to the relationship with your parents, with your siblings, with your, you know, uncles and aunts and tias and aunties, and you going to college, if that's something that everybody has rooted for or everybody has worked for, you're taking this momentous step that you know means a lot more than what is your major, right? It means you're going to take that first step that's going to have a ripple effect, hopefully, on everybody else. So it's a weight to carry, and so that's why, you know, when students graduate who are first gen and bring their parents over, it's just I know how it feels to know that you are accomplishing this not just for yourself but for a larger group and a larger community.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point, Cynthia, but I think it's even important if you don't have those rooting for you. Like my parents said, do we have to go? And they live 20 minutes away, you know, with no traffic.
Mhm.
And so I think when no one's rooting for you, you want to do well because there aren't people rooting for you. I think both sides of that are really important to highlight, and as your motivation, but also like what you'll do with it.
Thing I want to add about the John Lewis piece, and this, I'm just going to focus on this piece because I don't want people to think I'm throwing shade to Michelle. I felt like she was going to win because of popularity, but I think people missed the foundation and the college access piece that John Lewis was representative of. He was HBCU educated. So before Black people could even go to other institutions, it was the HBCUs that created the foundation for Black people, for Asian people, for Latinx people. Like that's where you went. You know, it was never our doors are closed to everybody. We welcomed everybody. And so being that he was HBCU educated and he was first gen, he automatically went into an environment that nurtured and empowered him as a person first and didn't see him as incapable or unable to do something. So his environment, I think, set him up to be somebody who ended up being game changing and trailblazing, and who set the foundation for others to come along. And he changed politics and he joined the Black fraternity. So he was set up from the get-go for success in spite of, just because of the culture he was embedded into. But I also recognize very well that, you know, Michelle having gone to these Ivy League institutions and being someone who, you know, had a different experience, and it was also this monetary thing, it shaped how they looked at the work that they did. Not saying that Michelle didn't think and knows that her work isn't important, but what we have felt the same about Michelle is she was never a first lady. But John Lewis was always going to be John Lewis because of what he did that was set up in the civil rights era. And I studied civil rights when I was in school through higher education perspective. So I understand the lens of how higher ed played a role in, one, creating access, but then two, putting people in positions to make really, really dynamic change. And when I think about those things, and John Lewis being first gen, being Black Greek, being HBCU educated, it just goes back to show that reason that college access is important, and having these variety of institutions for people to go to, where they can be nurtured and where they can be developed and empowered as people to go out and do great things for the world at large. And I think that both were great though, because I did watch and fangirled over Michelle's. But when I thought about, I was like, oh girl, yes, I'm first year too. Write your book and I'm doing my tour. But then the back part of it was, how profound was it, the message in his life and what we can see through even the different paths that they took. Both ended up being phenomenal and very well known, right, for their work. But I just think that college access issue is really highlighted through John Lewis's story and his life and his legacy. And that's why I really felt that one. But also as higher ed persons, we understand the importance of community. And there's a certain community you can get depending on what institution you go to that you won't get other places. That goes for Hispanic serving, that goes for, tribal and native, colleges, all of it. It's important. Women's colleges, they're important. And we have to stop acting like everybody needs the same thing, because we don't.
Yeah, I mean, and I think people don't talk about it a lot, but Michelle's first gen experience, obviously it's huge and it's important, but her brother, also sort of helped her navigate that system. her mom was really supportive, you know. She lived at home after college and could go home. That's huge, you know, as she was making a corporate salary. But I was obviously really excited about her story, and I love her. But I don't know, John Lewis was just John Lewis.
I was just reviewing the nominees. I think no, I withdraw. Well, even I have been recently talking about like when we start to see representations of African American, first gen African Americans in the movies, and for a long period of time, most like Spike Lee's movies and things like that, they focus on Black students at Black colleges. Now we're starting to see a shift of Black students at PWIs, which is reflective of where Black students actually are right now. And then you've got this rareness with now all of a sudden that's the rare representation. And that's what John Lewis represents. Okay, y'all, final one. Best movie narrative film, which was very, very close as well. The nominees are The Half of It, Uncorked, and Miss Juneteenth. Any guesses? What do you think?
Uncorked.
The winner is
I'm with Eve.
Miss Juneteenth. I thought Uncorked was going to pull it out. Yeah. Oh, we didn't talk about it. So real quick before we sort of dissect the narrative film, Mike did put in the chat Boy State as well, right? The significance of Boy State. However, first of all, let me hear why you thought Uncorked, and then we'll talk about the winner.
Take it away, Cynthia. Take it away.
So I actually was able to watch Uncorked with you, LT, right? We watched this, we did a watch along. And I just loved seeing, I forget the name of the main character, but I love seeing him enter this world that's really like this, it's like this very privileged, very, bougie, just like very external to his own family's experience, right? And going in there and pursuing his passion that is so foreign in a way to I think it's is it his father or his grandfather that he talks to? It's his father, right?
Father. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, his father. It just reminded me of those times when I did things and I was exposed to things when I was, in college and graduate school that my parents had absolutely no clue. And I'm over here like, check out this craft beer, like, oh, I like wine now, right? but it's what I especially liked, and this is really what pushed me to vote for it, was that at the end, and I'm sorry if there's spoilers, y'all, but at the end, there's a really great moment or series of moments where his father really helps him kind of cross that finish line. And even though the ending isn't quite what we'd expect from the Disney style endings, right? It's so real. And I think the big win there is that the connection and understanding is forged between himself and his father.
Mm-hmm.
in entering this world. And so, he's gonna like get back up and try again. And, have like Aaliyah playing in the background, like, like it's gonna happen. We're gonna make it happen. But just that connection, I was like, yes, like just keep going. And now you have this thing with your father, and we're good. So I'm really happy that the movie was made. Just in general, it was great. It was a good watch.
Yeah, I was happy that his dad had that respect for what he was doing, and it took a while to get there, but it definitely happened. And I think to me that's personally meaningful, because my dad literally said to me yesterday, I shouldn't have let you go to college. So I think I loved that he did connect with him, and he did share that respect with him.
I'll just add one thing, and of course we need to talk about the actual winner, but one of the things I thought was that brought a nice complexity to it was the dad had started college but didn't finish. And I thought that was that. So even though the dad had some college experience, you still see the dad, the whole family still being like, wait, what are you doing? Like this whole, this is why I am really thoughtful about the definition of first gen, because I've seen definitions that say, oh, well, if your parents started, like, no. A lot of people start. Most people don't finish. That's the difference. Okay, but what about Miss Juneteenth? Now, none of you may have voted for it, and I haven't watched it yet, but I've got a lot of feedback about why people were interested in it. Anyone here want to speak to it?
I didn't get to see it, but I really want to.
What I was told is that it's the reason why people liked it is because it doesn't have that whole Disney everything tied up in a neat bow at the end. So that's if we haven't watched it, a good motivator for checking it out to kind of address some of the issues that have come up. But once again, the main character, the main character started college, got pregnant, wasn't able to complete, and now her teenage daughter is about to go to college. And it is about what she's able, like legacy, what is she able to pass on versus not pass on. So I do think what's interesting about it, it isn't sort of an easy sort of story. I think we're headed to complexity, right? Like with Deaf U and Last Chance U and Ilhan Omar's narratives. Like I think that's I'm gonna claim a golden era, right?
Well, if we're gonna have a section in the bookstore or in the movie, there's no movie stores anymore. That's just called Netflix. But if we're gonna have a section, right, there has to be complexity in the stories. Otherwise, you're just watching the same story over and over again. And that's not even real. That's not a reality.
But imagine Netflix though, the little right?
Like first gen stories.
First gen story. That would be dope. Well, any other overall reactions or anything like that? That was all the categories. Dina, looked like you poised.
Yeah, I'm gonna, because this was my favorite category, and I actually voted for the half of it.
Oh yeah, talk about it.
I have to tell you, I think it was one of the best movies I've seen in a long time.
Whoa.
It was so deep, and the actress that plays the main character, I think she did a really phenomenal job with it. Mm-hmm. But I loved the fact that it showed how, even though her dad went to school in
his home country,
that he had a nervous breakdown, and that she was I think that there's a group of students that we haven't really looked at a whole lot, which are like almost survivors of mental illness at home. Mm-hmm. Because this is a bigger deal than, anybody really wants to admit, but these kids are coming out of these houses and they're responsible for literally taking care of day to day their parents or their siblings because their parents can't. And she ultimately made the decision to go to college, but I think there's so many kids that don't, that make the decision to, or just can't even think about the possibility of. So, but I loved it. I thought it was great, and it had some twists in it. It was just a really good storytelling. So,
yeah, it was very modern.
I loved Uncorked too. Uncorked was great too, but I was going back and forth between the two, but ultimately it was like, yeah.
I definitely agree that the half of it was very modern, really sort of. Again, we don't want to essentialize, but when you talk about some of the uniqueness of being first gen Asian American, could be that you do have a parent that was educated somewhere else, and that education is not acknowledged at all in the relocated country. The idea of her doing homework for the white kids in the school, those types of things. I thought it was really well done. I've connected with that with the writer and director of that movie as well.
Mhm. Yeah,
Great.
I thought that was the movie that I feel like most incoming freshmen could sort of like, because it just was so young, you know, it just had a, I don't know, it had such a, like you said, modern take on it, and I could see it playing in the movies and kids saying, yeah, you know.
Nice. Well, we have a few minutes left. Is there anything that any of the nominees that you wanted to talk about, didn't get a chance to? Any favorites?
I'd say job well done putting this together,
Yeah, thank you.
because it definitely shows a complexity of first gen, like we talked about earlier, but how first gen is everywhere. And like we don't even think, like even fiction, I was like, why did I think about this? But you just, it's just everywhere. And the fact that, you know, to bring attention to it, to make it matter, to show up, to have a conversation, this is groundbreaking, that we're talking about things that we see, that we identify with, from Black to woman to white to queer to single mother. It covers everything. So there was nothing that one of the categories did not touch that we could all connect to and relate to, and to be energized by it. And every day people are seeing these stories and they don't even recognize it, but we do, and now we can tell them about it. But I think that it was really exciting to just even learn about some authors and some books that I didn't know about, that otherwise, unless somebody put it in front of me similar, I was like, oh, I didn't know it was first gen, because there's no category for it. But I think going back to like the movies and documentaries, I was really fascinated most with those. I love documentaries, and to just be able to highlight people in different ways for what they do and let them know their work matters to a whole community of people who, I think our society is just waking up to what first gen is. And we're starting in higher ed, but now corporations are starting to say, oh, first gen professionals, because we're starting to make noise. And I think that it matters to continue to build community. And this is one way to even start the conversation. Just imagine how many people can relate to a documentary or a movie to talk about Mike Vick, and then somebody to highlight in an athletic space, this is what this means. It changes the game. And I look forward to seeing where 20 years from now, what's happening with this particular conversation. But this was fun. And I look forward to seeing the next round. And I'm still going to vote and read and all that stuff. So yeah, that's that.
And message me.
And message you.
I'll end here. If you have to hang on for just a second, I'm gonna thank you, but and stop recording now. But I just, if you can hang on just for one more minute, I appreciate you judges and all of the judges for, again, just taking a plunge. Like I really can't thank you enough.